There are a couple of changes that happen in a menopausal woman's life that make her feel like a complete alien living in a body that she does not know anymore. We can help them to really make this a little bit easier. Let's shift the mind away from always being skinny, always being on a diet, always being afraid of food. They have to do strength training, whatever form they like, 2 to 3 times a week, and they have to consume optimal amount of protein in a day consistently. Those two things, in my opinion, is two of the biggest needle movers in why patients will be successful in their weight loss journey, in their hormone navigation journey. We've got so much control if only we can realize that.
Welcome to smulcast, where we help you live a healthier and fuller life. Today we are looking into a topic that we as women all want to hear about at some stage of our lives. You've definitely heard about menopause and the challenges that comes with aging, but did you know that there's a secret weapon that you can use to help you navigate aging and menopause much better? And that is protein. I am Rolene Strauss, your host today, and we are joined by Dr. Ladivia Strauss, a medical doctor with a special interest in integrative medicine, and she has a passion to help you prevent disease rather than merely treating it. Welcome, Dr. Ladivia. Tell us a bit more about yourself, but also why you are so interested and passionate about today's topic.
Thank you, Rolene. I absolutely love to talk about menopause and anything hormone related, maybe because I am a woman myself, and you know that they say that menopause is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And that is something that I really want to leave my patients with, to give them hope and to help them understand that the way they are feeling when they come into my office is not the way that they have to finish their lives. There's a lot of things that we can do with regards to hormone replacement therapy and specifically lifestyle changes to help them navigate through this difficult time where their hormones are declining. And I feel passionate about this area because this is the largest group of my patient population, and I see them coming into my office crying in their hands because they've been to practitioner after practitioner, being dismissed, being told that it's just a part of aging and there's nothing that can be done about this. And that is why I love to get the message out and to really give people hope.
That's wonderful, and I'm sure that today's listeners will be hanging on your lips because of all of the wisdom and knowledge and years of practical experience you've had. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about menopause. What is it, and what are some of the changes that we go through as women while we navigate menopause?
Well, as you know, that menopause is defined as a one day in a woman's life. That is the day where she hasn't had a period or a menstrual cycle for 12 months. And that happens because of the declining hormones in the body. So we have 6 hormones that are being produced on a monthly basis, and we are specifically talking about the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So there are a couple of changes that happen in a menopausal woman's life that make her feel like a complete alien living in a body that she does not know anymore. And many of, or most of these changes are obviously related to the declining hormones, and it plays such an immense role and it has such a huge impact. And I want patients to understand that what they're going through is normal, but it can be navigated and it can be, we can help them to really make this a little bit easier. So we have the declining hormones. So like I mentioned, the 6 hormones do go down. They also have body composition changes where suddenly, without changing anything in their routine, they will start picking up weight and losing muscle. And also the distribution of the fat in the body changes, where a pre- and perimenopausal, mostly premenopausal woman will pick up weight mostly in the bum and the back area. Now suddenly they start picking up belly weight, and they come in my office and they all grab this little roll. They say, I've never had this before in my life, what's changing? Then they also have a change in the microbiome, and that is the little bacteria that live in our gut that has to be in a harmony, that helps us to break down the food particles, to metabolize certain things, to make hormones for us, and to really help us just live optimally Now suddenly they have a change in the microbiome consistency because of the declining estrogen. They also have a complete change and shift in the way they metabolize fat and glucose. And if you don't explain that to them, they really think that there's something wrong with them, or they go into the doctor's office and they cry because the doctor tells them, listen, you just need to eat less and exercise more. They have been doing that for many years. So they actually do have a change and a shift in the metabolism, and we can go into more detail about that later on. Then they also have a shift in their lifestyle patterns. Many of them are now becoming retired, and they have different responsibilities that they have not really adapted to. They are sleeping less, their sleep quality becomes less, and they have this horrible night sweats and hot flushes that keep them from having a good night's sleep. And then a lot of them comes from a background of constant yo-yo dieting, where they were in a calorie deficit, eating less, exercising too much, and then they overeat, they're in a binge phase. And then, so many of them come from this generation of women that were told to just eat less and exercise more, and they literally broke their bodies. But the good news is a body is never broken. It can always be healed, and there's always something that we can do to improve on that declining health.
Wow, menopause is still lying ahead for me, but I'm so grateful that I know you to help me go through these changes more effectively and efficiently. So we have talked about what menopause is, the changes that you can have with menopause. And when people think about treating menopause or going through it, they always focus on hormonal replacement therapy. But today we are talking about something else, something that you can incorporate in your lifestyle and in your diet to help you through this process easily, and that is protein. Let's talk about protein in the menopausal woman.
Thank you for that. And I would just like to establish a certain fact that yes, hormone replacement therapy is first and foremost the mainstay of treatment for declining hormones. But as you said, for the scope of this podcast, we will be focusing on the lifestyle changes and more around the protein. I'm not saying that by ingesting enough protein, you do not need hormone replacement therapy. It's just an add-on. And that's something that I would love for patients to also understand. It's not an either or. It's a 1 + 1 does not equal 2, but 1 + 1 actually equals 11. So if you do the hormone replacement therapy, if you're a candidate, if you do the lifestyle changes, if you do the consistent exercise, if you have enough protein, then you will have this wonderful effect. So it's not just an either or, it's 100% a combination of everything. And interestingly, there was a study done by a group, they call themselves the Protage group. It's a group of international researchers that did a study where they looked into the amount of protein that aging people need. And it's not just hormonal women, they also included men in the study. And we can link to this study in the show notes for people to go and have a look at that. It was quite fascinating what they found. And it's the one study that was done in human beings that now prove that we actually should not recommend them to have the 0.8 grams per kilogram, that's the RDA. They should actually, according to the study, consume 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein in a day. And per body weight means your ideal body weight. So not just 30 kilograms overweight, so I calculate my protein on that higher number. They have got a higher protein need because as we get older and as we age, our body develops something that we call anabolic resistance, meaning your cells become less sensitive to the stimulus of the protein that you consume. And that is something that's really important because as people age, they generally start eating less, they move less, so they are less hungry. And now the quality of what they are consuming also becomes a problem. And this is why it's something that I really advocate for in my patients, and that I really want to get the message out for people to realize that as we get older, their bodies inherently has got a higher need of total daily protein amount that they need to consume. And in them, the quality of the protein they consume becomes even more important. Because, you know, with grandma sitting on the couch, she might just have 2 Provitas and a piece, a little bit of cottage cheese. Or she might have tea and a rusk, and she feels satisfied. But she's not serving her body in the correct way. And we need to get this message across to them that when they are eating, it needs to be a nutrient-dense meal with enough of the good amino acids, specifically the essential amino acids that we've talked about in a previous episode. And they need to understand that the protein they consume, the need is more than when they were younger.
Yes. So you've mentioned the previous episode that we have done specifically focusing on protein and what it is and how much we need. But can you give us a quick recap for our listeners joining in for the first time? Why is protein so important for individuals in general, but also specifically for people aging?
Well, in short, protein is the building blocks of everything that happens in our body. For every metabolic and cellular function in the body, we do need proteins. And proteins consist of different amino acids, of which humans need 20 amino acids in a specific ratio. 11 of them are non-essential, meaning that your body produces them. 9 of them are essential, so you need to get that from your food. We need all these amino acids as building blocks for our body to be able to synthesize the proteins we need. And that is why protein becomes a star in our meals, and where we really need enough protein to have enough for the liver to make in that 24-hour cycle, but also for the muscles to have optimal muscle protein synthesis, because it's such a big problem. And we keep talking about the aging population or aging people. Do you realize that aging is seen from the age of 30? So when we talk about muscle that declines, it starts happening from the age of 30. We start losing large amounts of our muscle. Just simply, if you are not prioritizing enough protein and doing resistance training, you are going to lose your muscle. And from the age of 40, that starts to accelerate. But the good news is we can make that process a little bit slower and even reverse that by actively focusing on eating adequate amounts of protein, but also doing resistance training and working our muscles. And up to the age of 75, we've got the steady decline of muscle, but from the age of 75, it's a very steep decline. And it's extremely important for the listeners to realize that even though we're talking about protein equates to the health of our muscle. And the health of our muscles become extremely important, like I say, as we age, because first and foremost, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, they say that it starts in our muscle 10 to 15 years before it's being picked up on a blood level. So you go to the doctor, he does your yearly checkups, your blood glucose is normal, but you are not metabolically healthy because you have not been prioritizing all of these important factors. And what we mean if we say that the muscles are becoming insulin resistant, meaning it's not responding to the glucose flux from your food in the same way that it did earlier when your muscles and your cells were insulin sensitive. So meaning that you need to produce more and more and more insulin for that same glucose response to get the glucose from the bloodstream. And it's just this spiral that if you are not focusing on that and not giving attention to that, you are actually aging faster than you should be.
You've mentioned aging, you've mentioned muscle and protein. Let's talk about how protein can assist with the body composition changes that women who go through menopause or aging people go through.
Our body, like I said, it synthesizes protein 24/7, but muscle protein synthesis, the building of new muscle by ways of protein stimulation, only happens in response to a meal that you've had. And that meal needs to have the right composition, meaning that you need a minimum of 3 grams of leucine. That's one of the essential amino acids. And that equates to about 30 grams of protein in that meal. And then that will stimulate your muscle to make healthy proteins. And if you tell that to a woman, the first thing they tell me is, I will not be able to eat this much. How do I get that right? It's not so difficult. You just need to become cognizant, and you need to... The most difficult thing for me is to help the women of my generation and the generation before me to stop wanting to be the skinniest version of themselves and to become the strongest and healthiest version of themselves. And that does not mean that you have to pick up 5 or 10 or 20 kilograms. It just means let's shift the mind away from always being skinny, always being on a diet, always being afraid of food, towards how am I feeding my body? What instruction am I giving my cells? How am I building healthy cells and healthy muscles to be there for the people that I love, to be able to run around with my grandkids, to be able to travel with my husband and my friends when we get to that age? The saddest thing is that so many women and population in general have never learned to prioritize protein in their diets. And now they get to that age where they think, "Oh, it's too late. I've become frail. I've become insulin resistant. Now what?" The good news is it's never too late. Dr. Vonda Wright did an amazing study where she actually compared the healthy muscle of a 40-year-old triathlete. So she did MRIs. So they made a cut through of thigh muscle, and there's some wonderful pictures on the internet that the listeners can look at. And then you look at the thigh muscle of a 70-year-old sedentary person compared to the healthy one. And the healthy muscle is robust, thick muscle with almost no fat, where the sedentary 70-year-old have got little muscle and a lot of fat. So it means that the muscle became sarcopenic. The body started eating up the muscle because it needed amino acids. You didn't provide it. You didn't give the stimulus by with your food and with the training. So now that was replaced with fat. And then they took these people, they gave them healthy diets, they made them do exercise, and they did the pictures again, the MRIs. And now suddenly, if you look at the thigh muscle of a 70-year-old trained person with a good diet, it looks exactly the same as the 40-year-old. So it's never too late. Yes, it's much more difficult, and it takes much more planning if you've already let yourself go. But it's never impossible, and it's never too late. There's one of the most sad statistics where they say that if a 65-year-old person, and it's mostly women when this happens, fall and she breaks her hip, there's a 50% mortality risk in the next 6 months. That means there's a 50% chance for her to die within the next 6 months after breaking a hip. And that's in a person that wasn't sick. She was fully functional before that. Now, of the other 50% that do not die, many of them do not go back to their functionality they had before they had the fall. And my aim is to help people to prevent the fall rather than to help them with the rehab after they've fallen already. And this can 100% be prevented because protein is needed for us to have strong tissue, and that's the collagen, it's the bone, it's the ligaments, it's for functionality. And that is why we keep talking about muscle, but we cannot talk about protein without talking about muscle, because the two are so intertwined and they are so extremely linked to each other. And muscle, as Dr. Gabrielle Lyon states, that muscle is the organ of longevity. Muscle is the most metabolically active organ we have in our bodies. It has so many functions. It has so many roles to play apart from just looking bulky or looking good in your bikini. I'm not working on my bikini body. I'm working on my old lady body. And that is why I keep showing up in the gym. That's why I keep prioritizing protein at every meal, because I know that from the age of 30, I started losing my muscle. And I only realized the importance of this at the age of, say, 37, 38, when I realized these changes in my body. But now I've got the rest of my life to work on this. And that's the message of hope that I want to give to the listeners out there.
I think it's so important that you mention that as women and as individuals, we shouldn't use the scale as a measuring tool of our health. We should look at what our bodies actually consist of, and do we have enough of this organ of longevity, enough muscle to help us age more gracefully and more effectively. Let's move over to hormones. And menopause and hormones obviously go together, but how does an increase in protein intake help us navigate hormonal changes more effectively?
I love this question because patients are often shocked with my answer. When we talk about hormones in this sense, we do not talk about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Those are our sex hormones. We actually talk about the hormones, the insulin, the glucagon, the leptin, the thyroid hormones, because they are influenced by our protein intake. you cannot increase your estrogen levels by eating more protein. I wish it was possible, but it's not. But as I've mentioned, that the metabolism in your body changes how you metabolize fat and how you metabolize glucose, completely changes and shifts in menopause. And this is where then leveraging protein in your meal becomes more important, and where it becomes even more important to look at your refined carbohydrate intake, to not spike your blood glucose, to not have such a refined carb-rich meal, rather focusing on the protein and the healthy carbs in the meal. And patients often hear me when I say carbs, they think, oh, it's then they say, no, I don't eat bread, I don't eat pasta. But the veggies we consume also contain carbohydrates, but that's good. We want that. There's fiber, there's vitamins, there's phytonutrients. So please do have your carb-rich meals, but have the right form of carbs. And in this age group, it becomes much more important to look at blood glucose stabilization, where you should not have that spike and dip, and the spike and the dip, because that influences our mood, that influences our energy, that influences how we will go about our day and how we will react to certain other stimuli. And I think it's important for the listener to realize that when we talk about protein and hormones, there are many hormones than only the sex hormones in our body, and they are severely influenced by the amount of protein that we take in. As we said, we will build healthy muscle. Our immune system will become more robust. And you've heard me mention the Bratage study, but it was done in healthy aging individuals. They say that for aged individuals with chronic diseases and diseases of frailty, they might even have a protein need of up to 2 or 2.2 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. And that becomes quite difficult. And this is where I advise these patients to really talk to an individual, a trained individual that can really guide them and help them in working out what their needs are, because it becomes even more important than in the younger individuals. And in all of my patients, I tell them there are two things that are absolutely inevitable when they get to this perimenopause and menopausal transition, is they have to do strength training, whatever form they like, 2 to 3 times a week, and they have to consume adequate amounts, optimal amount of protein in a day consistently. Those two things, in my opinion, is two of the biggest needle movers in why patients will be successful in their weight loss journey, in their hormone navigation journey. And they will find, oh wow, the hormone replacement therapy that I have been prescribed by my gynecologist is more effective now. Why? You didn't even change the dosage that I'm using. It's because you're giving your body the right information. Then the signaling is better and everything is just better.
Talking about weight management, I think that's one of the main challenges that women overall, but specifically menopausal women face. And I can imagine that a lot of women come knocking at your door to ask you for help with regards to weight management. Let's talk about the different tools out there currently for practitioners to help women with their weights, and what are some of the dangers with regards to these tools and health and menopause?
I'm glad you mentioned this. And obviously, what's on everybody's lips nowadays are the GLP-1 agonists. They are the glucagon-like peptide ones, and it's really wonderful drugs, and there are very specific indications and there are very specific criteria. It's very well known and used in the type 2 diabetics that struggle with weight loss and they don't have good glucose control. And then there are specific criteria in obese individuals or overweight individuals. But it's being used more and more off-label nowadays. And off-label just means patients who do not fit one of those two specified criteria. Then doctors use it as an additional tool to help them lose weight. And these are the injections that everybody's talking about. I'm not going to mention names, but it's the semaglutide, the tirzepatide, the liraglutide. It's those molecules that people inject either daily or weekly, depending on which molecule they're using. And I think it's a very helpful tool, and I think we should look past just all the negative things that we hear about these medications, because they really change the playing field for knowledgeable practitioners to really be able to help their patients become metabolically healthy faster and easier. Especially these women, they've been on yo-yo diets their whole life, up and down and up and down and up and down. they do not want to try another diet anymore. And then these GLP-1s work on a very physiological level. It will help the body become more insulin sensitive and producing more insulin when needed. It decreases the formation of glucose in the liver. It will decrease appetite, and then it will also decrease the digestion. So those are the 4 mechanisms of action, and all 4 of these, when used together, will really help this patient reach the optimal weight sooner. And I'm not going to go into the details whether I agree with it or whether I disagree with it, or should you stay on it long term, can you use it for short term. I just want patients to have the correct information when they do choose to use these medications, because it's available very readily nowadays. Please make sure that you get it from a reputable source and that you get it from a practitioner that is knowledgeable and that's going to follow you up regularly. You need imperatively to have at least an in-body scan before you start, and then on a regular basis. Why? These patients, like I mentioned, they will have a decreased appetite. So they are going to eat like a little bird. And what are they going to eat? Maybe an apple, maybe 2 carrots, maybe a rice cake with some cheese on it. There's no protein in that meal. So if they consume so little, they do not replenish, they are going to break down muscle. And that's where the bad rap of these medications are coming in, where they tell you cannot use this, you're going to break down muscle, you're going to gain more fat. That's absolutely untrue. It's a very successful tool if used correctly. So these patients need to consume optimal amounts of protein, not over-consuming, because they are already struggling with constipation because of the medication. They need fiber, they need veggies, but they need a good combination. And then it's an extremely helpful tool for these patients to reach their goal maybe quicker, and then to be able to sustain and maintain it in the long term.
Is there a place for protein when it comes to the mood swings and the mood changes that women go through?
Well, as I mentioned before, each amino acid in the body have got a very specific function. And there are certain amino acids that will help stimulate certain areas. So for instance, the leucine that's important for muscle protein synthesis, the threonine that's important for hair, nail and gut lining health, and then also tryptophan that will help with mood and cognition and the production of our healthy neurotransmitters, the serotonin, the melatonin. So in that sense, getting in the right amino acids will definitely help. But also, if you eat enough protein, you will feel satisfied, you will be satiated, you will not be constantly hungry and trying to suppress your appetite and trying to take in less calories. That in itself will make you feel grumpy. So when you have enough protein, you will not be hungry all the time, and that in itself will also boost mood. So I think it's a combination of factors of why protein is help. And I always say that I will be able to live a life having just watermelon and steak. So who does not like a big piece of steak? It boosts my mood just seeing that piece of steak, never mind taking a bite of it.
So you address the hangry aspect of menopause through protein increase. When it comes to the sources of protein that menopausal women eat, is there a type of protein or a source of protein that's more beneficial?
Again, that depends on the quality of the protein and her dietary preferences. Is she following a plant-based diet, or is she following an omnivorous diet that also includes animal-based proteins? Because there's a difference in the amino acid composition of these two. And it's really important to make sure that you get the right amount of all the essential amino acids, and specifically for muscle protein synthesis to get that 3 grams of leucine. So in that sense, it doesn't matter where your protein comes from. Just make sure that the composition of the proteins are correct. And I often find in my aging population, and by that I mean the older people, they are not so active anymore. They have neglected their muscle now for a long time, and now I teach them they need to start having 90 to 110 grams of protein in a day. That's very difficult for a 65 or a 70-year-old to suddenly change the way she's been eating. She probably, if she was lucky, she got in 50 grams of protein in a day. Now suddenly to have 90 to 110 grams. So in that population, I find it very beneficial then to add a good protein source in the form of a protein powder, or what kind of protein supplement they want and need. Just make sure that it's from a very reputable source with not a lot of added ingredients, and that it will really add to that essential amino acids. And just something that I'm thinking of now is we're talking about 110 grams of protein a day, that does not mean 110 grams of steak. That means 110 grams of protein in the food that you are consuming. And if you look at, say for instance, 100 grams of beef actually only has 20 grams of protein. 2.5 cups of quinoa has 20 grams of protein. A cup of full cream yogurt only has 20 grams of protein. If you've eaten all of those, you've only had 60 grams of protein. I said you need 90 to 110 grams. So the listeners just need to be cognizant of that also. If we say that you need 110 grams of protein in a day, you don't measure the protein source, you measure the protein that's in the source. And I don't want people to become obsessed and now they think, oh, now I need to put everything on a calculator, I need to put everything into an app. It takes a week or two, maybe a month, to really teach yourself and really become aware of what the protein content of certain food groups are, and then you decide, okay, so I'm allowed to have X, Y, and Z, and how am I going to spread this now throughout my day, week, and month?
Let's talk about what a day or what life on a plate looks like for a woman going through menopause who has chosen to increase her protein intake.
Okay, again, I'm going to give you this disclaimer. I'm not a registered dietitian, but I do work with patients on a daily basis, and I see what works practically. So I'm going to give the answer from that standpoint. Yes, it is based in science, but it might not be perfectly fit a dietitian's nutritional guidelines. So an easy way for me is to tell my patients, firstly, let's work out what your protein need is, and let's start slow and see how we can work you up. How many training days do you have and what's your goal? So first, let's establish how much protein she needs. So say for instance, she needs about 100 grams of protein in a day. How are we going to get that in without her feeling overwhelmed or feeling that she's going to pick up weight? Because it's a reality. If you add protein, you also add energy. So you will need to substitute it with something else for something else. Otherwise, you're simply going to pick up weight because your energy balance becomes more and more and more. And they have been trapped for long enough in the eat less, exercise more yo-yo. We want to get them out of that. So what most of my patients do is they start the day and they break their fast. And I put that in inverted commas because who told us that breakfast needs to be at 7 or 11? Breakfast comes from the word break. Fast. I am breaking my fast, and you decide what your eating window is. It definitely becomes more difficult to get in all your protein when you've got a 6 or 8 hour condensed eating window. So I suggest a little bit more lenient and wider window to be able to get in your protein in a day. So start with, for instance, a smoothie, a healthy smoothie with some added fat and with your protein source that contains most protein powders nowadays is between 20 to 25 grams of protein. But now you only have 25 grams. We said you need about 30. So maybe add some nuts, add some milk, add some yogurt. Then your smoothie consists of your 30 grams of protein, or add 1 or 2 boiled eggs or 3 or 4 slices of biltong. It does not have to be difficult. So breakfast sorted. Now, after 4 hours, you can eat something again. You will not be hungry within 4 hours. I promise you that if you had enough protein and healthy fats in that breakfast meal, you will be satisfied for 4 hours afterwards.
And a lot of people don't want to eat protein in the breakfast. So it's so important. It's actually a lovely life hack to start your morning with some protein.
Exactly. Yes, you can obviously have a 3-egg omelette with some cheese and avo and mushrooms, but an easy way is do the smoothie. You have a lot of you already 2 or 3 cups of your veggies in, because now we need to get our 6 cups of veggies also in a day. It starts becoming really a full-time task just to manage your plate. So then when you have your another meal 4 hours later, that's more or less around lunch. What works for most perimenopausal and menopausal women is to have a nice robust protein portion, depending on what your portion consists of, with 2 handsful of veggies. And that can be a combination of salad, steamed veggies, boiled veggies, whatever. It doesn't have to all be 2 handsful of the same. Have a combination. And then 4 hours later, have another meal again with your robust protein source, 2 handsful of veggies. So if you started your day with 2 cups of veggies, 2 cups for lunch, 2 cups for dinner, 6 cups of veggies sorted. You have your carbohydrates, you have your vitamins, you have your fiber, because fiber becomes another very important topic when we talk about protein. I never talk about protein without mentioning fiber, because as a menopausal and perimenopausal woman, you need at least 25 to 35 grams of fiber in a day. We need that for our hormone metabolism. We need that for our gut health. We need that for our glucose stabilization. We need that for our cholesterol metabolism. And if you are only focusing on protein, you are missing that. So I don't want people to obsess over this. It's really, really much easier than you are being told by every influencer wanting you to follow their one specific diet. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but this needs to be practical. This needs to be doable, and it should not add to my already stressed lifestyle. So just think of it again. Why am I eating? I'm eating to feed my cells. I'm eating to give my body the information on what I want it to build. We've got so much control if only we can realize that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ladivia, for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and years of experience with us. We're all just hanging on your lips, and I feel like I can navigate aging and menopause so much easier because of you. So thank you very much. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you've gained some valuable insights and knowledge to make sure that your aging process is much more graceful and easier for you to manage. And here is to living a healthier and fuller life. Until next time.